Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2021 and the name of the show is Babylon 5. This is Season 2, Episode 21, the penultimate episode of Season 2. It's called Comes the Inquisitor. So full spoilers for the episode. As always, the premise of this one is that Kosh wants to test Delen's, not so much her loyalty per se, but just to test that she is the right person in the right place at the right time for the job that she is kind of taking on board as this kind of one of the leaders of this resistance. Although, as it turns out, towards the end of the episode, it's equally a test for Sheridan, which makes sense given that he's also co-leader of this resistance. So that was not a surprising turn. However, there are some surprising turns with who this Inquisitor who's here to test them are, which are kind of interesting, a little bit wacky, and definitely probably one of the things we'll talk about mainly in this episode. And then there's also a pretty important, I would say, and hefty subplot with Jakar that I think is where maybe more of the praise of this episode is going to come from me. But yeah, so what did you think of Sebastian? Or before we get to the reveal at the end, I want to save that. Let's keep that as a separate thing, right? Because that's like a whole separate can of worms. So the person who arrives in a Vorlon, because I got excited for like a minute. I was excited.
Yeah, we were going to get another Vorlon.
I thought, two Vorlons? There's going to be two Vorlons running around, and out comes and they tease it. The direction is teasing this Kane and he's walking in the footsteps, and then you see the top hat, and you're like, what is this? Who is this asshole? And he's like, I am Sebastian, and he's he's got a very proper English voice. He's very classical, and the bombshell is dropped when Sheridan's asking all these questions. Like Delen's asked Sheridan to keep out of this and make sure he's allowed to go and do what he's supposed to do and not to interfere and so on and so on. And he's asking questions, and Sebastian gets kind of. He's just kind of always upset. he's never pleasant to anyone, but he kind of snaps at him and says, look, here's all the things that I am willing to tell you. Yes, I have been on the Vorlon homeworld. Yes, they have been to Earth before. And he says that he's from 1888, and I went, wait a minute. Have they just told us that Vorlons are actually the reason why some people have been abducted from Earth in our mythos of UFOs, that people have been abducted? We're tying the Vorlons to that. I kind of love that. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to make a joke, but we're going to wait on the reveal. But when he shows up, I sort of made a joke like, oh, they got this guy.
Oh, did you
who it actually is.
So you accidentally guessed it. What's so funny about that is that Star Trek, the original series, actually kind of did something with this. It's very different. It's a very different premise, and it's a very different way of doing it. But they did kind of touch on the same idea in a way in that show as well. So, yeah. So I was kind
Let's
of
just say who it is, so we can talk about it.
Okay, he's Jack the Ripper. All right, he's Jack the Ripper.
I mean, he walks out. I'm like, and he starts talking, and he's British. I'm like, oh, is it Jack the Ripper? And then when he's interrogating.
Joe, I think this is. I think this is because this is not to just sort of go, oh, Americans, but I do think you jumping to Jack the Ripper.
It's either that or Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I think you jumping to Jack the Ripper is an American thing because you're like, oh, I know two British people from this time period. Like you say, Jack the Ripper or Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, so we watched recently. We watched the movie Time After Time, which is also a movie about Jack the Ripper.
Recently, that was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, but it's a movie that I already knew pretty well. Okay. So it was in. It's not that long ago that we watched a Jack the Ripper thing, and when they're in this promenade area, and he's staring at this buxom girl and talking about how corruption is still around and evil and stuff. I'm like, is he really just Jack the Ripper? I know I made that joke, but it just was piecing together, and then he starts to torture Delen for 40 minutes.
I did
torturing a woman for a while. When the reveal happened, I wasn't like, oh wow, Jack the Ripper.
No, see, this is a total opposite for me. When the reveal happened at the end, when because we'll get to what the rest of the actual plot with him was, but at the end of the episode, after that's over, and Sheridan says, "Hey, Ivanova, can you look up our history files? Look up this name and London, blah blah blah." And he comes to confront him before he's leaving, and he says, "I looked you up, and you disappeared, on November the 11th, 1888, which is right after a string of murders stopped happening." And that's the line where I went, "Wait a minute. Are they about to tell me this asshole's Jack the Ripper?" Because it never occurred to me. I never even had the thought in my head that they were going to go down the path of this.
Yeah, well, you do know a lot more British people than I do.
This is, I mean, not from that time period, admittedly. I don't think I can name you that many. But
yeah,
it's such a hokey idea that it never even occurred to me that this show would go down that path.
So here's my thought once they did the reveal and stuff. Because I also was thinking, well, maybe he's Jack the Ripper for Sheridan's sake. Because once Sheridan started being interrogated also, I thought, okay, maybe it's just an illusion of Jack the Ripper because it's something from Earth history, like an evil person from Earth history, and this has something to do, like the Vorlons wanted Sheridan to see Jack the Ripper for his sake for some reason, like there'll be a connection there. But no, and then, yeah, they revealed it was just him.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I dislike it. I mean, it definitely is a big concept to take in that they actually abducted Jack the Ripper and they've been using him sort of almost as a penance for what he's done for him to be used by them.
It is a little bit odd that the Vorlons, like, I'm trying to justify it a bit in my head. Like, the Vorlons, like, went through Earth history or was watching Earth and saw that guy and said, "We need him. Like, he's a resource we need for something."
Yeah, I would say paying attention. I mean, it could turn out. I mean, obviously, Babylon 4 was time traveling technically. I don't know if there's anything to suggest as of yet that the Vorlons are just going back in time and doing stuff. So that's for now. Assume that there's no time travel involved, and it's just they've been around.
Just they were watching Earth, saw Jack the Ripper do a bunch of murders, and thought like, this is the guy we need. This is a resource that we don't have that we need. I think
this is the interesting part, though, is kind of why they would pick someone like this and the idea of like making him kind of pay for what he's done. And he's still very Jack the Ripper-y, but he's kind of doing it with this sort of purpose now. He's sort of serving the Vorlons. And we know that the Vorlons are very interested in Earth history. We know that they pay attention. We've theorized about who they really are. All these things. And I think this, like, context, the reveal of them taking someone like Jack the Ripper is a huge deal for the sort of thing that the Vorlons are willing to do. And I think in retrospect later on, if you watch this a second time, once we know more about them, this is probably going to fit very nicely into how they do things and who they are. But right now, this was a big thing corny to take in.
Yeah,
it's corny.
It's a little corny. It's a little like, I mean, it is a little bit like Star Trek the original series, or even like a little bit of the last season of the show, where it started off a little bit corny. So my dog's dying.
It never did this though. It never did. Oh, this person's actually Jack. Okay, you made fun of the Ironheart stuff. I like the Ironheart stuff, but I mean, I guess you could say that was a bit corny for what it was, even though it was doing something very different.
I like the ideas of it. Yeah. Maybe the Death Walker. No, but Soul Taker.
I mean, I'll give it this. It had balls. I was like, okay, you went there. You're committing to this, and you've got Sheridan standing there like his mouth agape that he's just effectively met Jack the Ripper, who, obviously Jack the Ripper's a big enough name in history that I believe that people would still know who he is in a couple of 100 years. Like I buy that. That's fine.
Yeah, he's like one of the earliest recorded serial killers.
He's already lasted this long. I mean, it's not like it's recent history now. It's going back a bit. So, cool. And the great thing about Jack the Ripper, because he was never caught, they can do this without ruining history. It's like, oh, that's why he was never caught, because he was abducted. In the same way that in Loki they can
I thought about that actually.
Mild spoilers for Loki episode 1 if you've not started that show yet, but they revealed
episode 1 like 15 minutes in.
But they revealed that he was DB Cooper, right? And that was actually Loki just having some fun, effectively. So you can do things like that with these Earth mysteries that don't have endings, don't have explanations, and it's just a cute sort of thing. So I'm curious to see what I think of this as we learn more about the Vorlons. And I do think it at least ties in a little bit to their interest in Earth, their interest in human beings, and kind of how they treat people and how they are trying to like make them better. So the idea that they took the worst of the worst, Jack the Ripper, and have tried to do something with them, that is somewhat interesting in and of itself. It is corny though. I can't deny that when I realized that they were doing Jack the Ripper, I went, okay, all right. I think honestly, I'd say my biggest critique of this episode, which I do think overall is not bad, and I love the subplot. I do think a lot of his monologuing when he's interrogating Delenn, when she's got the sort of the torture bracelets on, there was definitely times as he was monologuing that I started to not pay attention to some of what he was saying, because it was just kind of like going on, and like there was sentiments by the end that you kind of got. The key thing here is that Delenn had to prove that she wasn't doing what she was doing for glory. The idea that, because ultimately what happens is that she's willing to sacrifice herself for Sheridan without anyone ever knowing that she sacrificed herself for the cause. Because it's not, it's about the cause. It's not about getting the adoration for it. It's not about getting the credit for it or anything like that. It's about being willing to do it. And Sheridan also kind of proves as well that he's willing. That's kind of the whole point, right? That they've proven that they are willing to be selfless, that they're willing to really dedicate themselves to this. Unfortunately, as an episode of TV though, it is like a lot of time of him walking around in circles with like spotlights like around the room, and him just like talking for so long, and it's so dry that it's just kind of like, I'm barely paying attention to the actual words that you're saying at this point. So
yeah, some of it I thought was all right. Like I didn't think the actor was that bad. I just thought I agree that a lot of the torturing scenes, if you can call them that, like they did start to blend together a bit, and yeah, like he sort of, it is frustrating for us because he's playing a game with Delenn and she doesn't know the rules. She even says like, I don't know the rules of this, so like, and so we just kind of play along for a while. It's kind of, he's kind of speaking the same way that like Kosh speaks. He's speaking in riddles, or the answers that he wants are not the answers that you seem obvious. So it's just kind of more the same of that, of like, okay, we'll just have to get through this code dialect that he's speaking until the character figures it out or we figure it out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think this episode feels like it fits into the overall plot fairly well. It feels like a solid character moment for our main pair, who clearly are affectionate of each other, the way he holds her at the end. Right,
that is another thing that they didn't really address all that well, like, because they're like, okay, you're willing to sacrifice yourself for somebody who is essentially, I mean, not much more than an acquaintance, but, I mean, we know that they have a romance blossoming. So there is feelings for them. Like, it's not like, oh, you sacrifice yourself for a stranger. You sacrifice yourself for potentially love, because, that relationship is growing.
Yeah. I don't think that's a hidden at this point, though. I think even at the start of the episode when she comes and asks, and because Sheridan even says, when she says, I'm asking you to stay, I know it's a lot to ask for you to just sort of like not address any of this and not look into who's arriving in the station. And Sheridan just responds with, you asking is not a problem.
Yeah,
basically. He says, you have carte blanche. I'm never going to like deny you something unless it, whatever. But
so for us, like, we know that they have something blossoming, but like, I don't think the interrogator knows. Or Sebastian knows. I don't think Kosh really knows, because then why, if it was really a selfless sacrifice, if it's for love, then it's not, there is something there. There is like a reason to sacrifice if you're doing it for love. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't it kind of go against a bit of what his test is for?
I get what you're saying. I kind of feel like I just want to move past it, because ultimately I wasn't into the interrogation stuff that much. And
okay, I mean, that's fine.
I feel
it's just
like
a thought I had when I was watching it. Like, well, I mean, yeah, but there is the whole romance thing.
I think the importance of this, other than them sort of proving themselves to Kosh so that Kosh trusts them a bit more, the importance of this is the idea that the Vorlons are taking people from Earth's history who are not necessarily good and using them in good ways. And that's the thing that will matter later when we're talking about things. I think the actual scenes with, because Delenn and Sheridan have had better, more intimate scenes. They've had scenes that we have like had these sparks of great things with them, where we've felt the passion between them, we felt the emotion between them. Even this episode at the start, that example we brought up where he just says, "You asking is not a problem." That moment gave me more than the sacrifice a bit. You know, like it, because it felt genuine.
I feel like they keep doing the same thing with them. Is, you know, every episode since the virus episode, where they're going to get really close at the end, and then at the beginning of the next episode it'll be the same thing where they're not like, I don't know, they're kind of flirty, but I feel like we've already had this arc with them before so many times now where they get close at the end but they don't actually like say anything or do anything. I'm sure tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but next week's episode they're going to kiss. Like,
I don't know if I agree with what you just said, because to me this did feel informed by their past experiences. Like the way he offers, like, you've got carte blanche at the start, to me felt like it was informed by these shared experiences they have had. Yes, they've not kissed or anything, they've not like really properly, but I feel like the way he smiles at her, the way they look at each other now, there's almost like a more willingness to be different with each other. There's this like change in body language, there's this change in how, like, if you go back to like earlier episodes this season and you look at how Sheridan, like, yes, well, obviously we were noticing him react to her, we were noticing, but he was kind of trying to hide it, or he was like confused by what he was feeling, or confused by the fact that he was happy to see her, whereas now he's just happy to see her, and he's not ashamed of showing that he's happy to see her, and we're seeing it kind of develop. So I will disagree a little bit, as I do feel like it is progressing, and I can kind of feel that there. Sure, are they going to kiss at some point? They're going to. But I'm not like, and would it happen in the season finale? It feels like a good place to guess, but
I mean, I just think this season's been building up to it.
I don't really care that much when it happens though. Like, if they don't kiss for like 2 more seasons, I don't care. Like, I'm fine with it.
Invested.
Oh, I'm invested. Like, but like.
I mean, if something happens where Delenn has to go back to Minbar or whatever, and they're separated for a while, it's like.
The storyline and the chemistry these two have in the writing of this show is kind of beyond the typical TV thing as, oh, we're waiting for the will they won't they to have their kiss. Like, the relationship feels stronger than that, so I don't necessarily need, like, I'm sure it's going to happen, like, I have no doubt that it's going to happen, but I don't need the typical TV payoff, oh, the first time Jim and Pam kiss, you know, like, it's more than that, it's different than that, it's a bit more I don't know, nuanced than that. And I think what were you laughing at?
No, I was pulling out your vocabulary word before you did. I was trying to.
Oh, did you think I was going to say nuanced?
Yes.
I do like the word nuanced. It's a good word. More things should be nuanced.
I agree.
More things should be nuanced.
But I like these relationships, and I want them to be less nuanced. Just have babies already.
You want them just to snap out of it and make it the Discovery Channel, is that it?
That's right.
Get on with it. No, I'm enjoying the building, like the romantic. I'll call it romantic camaraderie that they're forming, where it really feels like
I don't want another work husband work wife relationship. I want the real thing here. Okay,
well, fine, but anyway, you know where I stand. Let's talk about the other side of the episode. Let's talk about Jakar and trying to kind of support the Narn on the Narn homeworld. He's trying to get weapons to the sort of the underground army, which is very interesting because we know that the consequence if any of them get caught harming a Centauri. So we know that what they're willing to go through here. This episode featured so many good Jakar scenes, but the very first one where he's standing,
he's such a scene stealer.
He's standing, like, you know, just trying to tell everyone else that, hey, eventually the Centauri are going to come for everyone. Once they realize that they're powerful enough to take out the Narn like this, they're going to come for the humans, they're going to come for all of your races, they're going to come for everyone. And the way this scene ended with the camera going up to the balcony, and it's just Veer who's been standing there listening. Because Veer was notably not that present last episode with Londo's big, you know, dark stuff where he was, like, being really awful in front of Jakar and the war was ending. He was notably kind of absent there for the most part, and it made me immediately go, yeah, what is he thinking? What is his reaction to what they've just done? You know, how does, because we know Veer's always been kind of against, like, Londo's path that he's been taking with those characters, and I immediately got excited by it. I was like, and this is the great thing about when you get invested in a show like this, because all it had to do was show me Veer looking a little, like, you know, deep in thought, and I was like, oh, there will be something to come from this.
Yeah.
And that excited me.
Yeah, and I think it's it was sad to see Jakar in like this promenade area talking like a crazy person with everyone ignoring him. When he came from ambassador level, now he's stuck with trying to get support by just begging people on the streets and warning them of a upcoming doom that people would be like, it's just crazy Jakar.
It feels like you should have a sandwich board on saying the end is nigh or something like that.
Right, but like what other resource does he have? He has nothing. He's been stripped of all power. Well, I guess he has resources of his friends who are on the ships or in the station still, but for the most part, like if he wants to gain support, he wants to remind people that the Centauri like they may talk pretty and like shower you with gifts when you come over and wine and are all jovial, but they are monsters. Like we have to keep reminding you that they are they will not stop. They are power hungry.
Yeah, before we talk about the rest of his actual plot, let's just go to the Ellerveer scene, because I think this for me is the standout scene of the episode. This is the one, and I've been noticing this season, I've been bringing it up more and more, especially in this back half of the season, that the direction's getting better, that there's these little moments of direction. And so we have a scene where Veer is sort of like someone saying, I want to speak to Ambassador Malari, and he's like, his time's all booked up, he's too busy, go away. And he goes into the elevator, and there's a moment of him just standing there, and there's just quiet. And then the camera, as he sort of steps back, slowly reveals that Jakar is standing behind him in the elevator. And everything from this, from the intense close-up on Jakar's face, as he doesn't say anything, he is just silent. And
staring at him.
And Veer notices him, starts to look away, starts to fidget, he looks very awkward, he doesn't know what to say. And then he eventually musters up the words, I'm sorry, and tries to sort of elaborate on that, but he tries to say, I'm sorry. And what's so good about this is that you know it's genuine. You know that Veer didn't want the path that was taken to be the one that was taken. We know he tried to talk Londo out of doing things multiple times. He clearly is affected by what's happened here. He's ashamed of what his people have done. And he's trying to communicate at least some of this to Jakar in this moment. He's devastated to even look at him. And Jakar, of course, he has a very dramatic ending to the scene where he like cuts his hand and says, like, dead. Like, can you apologize to them? He says, I'm sorry, I can't. He's like, well, in that case, I can't forgive. And that it's a heartbreaking scene because Veer is such a relatively innocent character who feels like he's caught up with Londo and all of his shit. And this hurts because we're rooting for Jakar, we care about Jakar at this point. Which is about just, again, the turn from episode 1 of this show, where now Jakar's the hero of the two, and he's the one we're rooting for, but, preconceptions and all that. So, wonderful stuff, wonderfully performed, wonderfully directed. Like, I think the direction here was perfect. It was the perfect mood that it wanted to create.
Yeah, I agree. Because it is, it's really done well, the reveal of Jakar's in the elevator with him after, like, Veer's like guard is down because he's finally escaped the pestering Centauri who wants an audience with Londo.
And just on just quickly on the flip there of revealing Jakar, it's actually a nice flip of the opening scene because that started on Jakar and revealed Veer to the audience, so it's a nice reversal of that.
Yeah. But I do think like their body language, both of them, is like really excellent in this. Like the way that Veer like senses that he's there before he looks, and then slowly moves away to the opposite end of the elevator out of like a little bit of like respect for Jakar. Like I don't deserve to stand next to him, but just so much shame. There's so much shame in his voice. And when he says, I'm sorry, and when Jakar like cuts himself and he starts saying death, 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 you can hear his voice breaking halfway through. Like he really is just totally devastated by this, and like can't even talk to his enemy about it.
And this is the so true thing about this is that when one nation, in terms of like Earth, right, in terms of like incidents in the past where some government who's in power does something horrible to another group of people, not everyone who was in that country supported the idea or supported the actions of that government. Look at how close to 50-50 a lot of elections are in a lot of countries. Like, it clearly, when someone is in power, like the regime that is taking control of the Centauri, and they do what they do, we know the Emperor, the previous Emperor who died, we know he wanted peace. He wanted to apologize to the Narn for what happened in the past. And Veer is this example that I think is very important to say. Not all Centauri are all bloodthirsty. Like, some of them are decent, I want to say human beings, but they're decent Centauri, they're decent, humane life forms. And I think that those levels of, like, there's different types of people who believe different things in every single race and every single culture is really important. And it's one of the things that makes the show a bit more real. For as much as it's bringing in Jack the Ripper, who was beamed up by aliens in the 1880s, it gives us the show is grounded by the fact that the characters and their problems and the politics that they're playing with all feel very real, and that's what makes it feel this way. So yeah, the scene just, it did so much for these two characters. You come out of this scene and both characters have benefited immensely from this interaction. It's the perfect clashing of two characters who have barely shared a conversation the entire show up until this point, but it still had so much weight. I mean, how much interaction have they had? Like, when Londo's been there, maybe Jakar will turn and say something to Veer, like, casually or something. Like, like, there's not been a lot, if any of that.
I can't remember, but I'm sure it hasn't been very much.
So,
I mean, Veer's only been in like 8 episodes in total, probably. Maybe a little bit more.
I mean, you say that. I think you crack those jokes, but I think it's a testament to the show that it doesn't have to have all these characters in constant episodes.
No, I know. You always bring that up, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, like, we can go long spells without having a character in it.
Which also makes you don't get sick of them, and you're not forcing them into episodes that don't need all the extra characters to, like, weigh it down.
How long has it been since we've seen Poochie? I don't really miss him, though.
Yeah, I don't really miss you can kind of tell he's the character that was forced onto GMS, right? Like, maybe we'll have something for him next season. Well, you'll have, or if he's still there, that is. Maybe we'll die heroically next episode.
Off screen.
Maybe we'll get killed by a puddle, just intentionally.
That Armis gets around series to series.
So Jakar's whole thing is that he's trying to get the weapons, and the fellow Narn are skeptical of giving him all of their money because it's going to cost a lot of money. Because I will say, the actor who was like the arms dealer was not the greatest actor in the world. He was a bit hokey.
Yeah, Mr. Cage or something.
Yeah, but he's
put a weird voice on.
He's 500,000 credits to get these weapons, and all these Narn are saying, look, you can't do this. You were kind of in charge before and all this happened. Should maybe we consider someone else? And they basically give him a challenge, which is, if we can't even contact our families on the homeworld to see if they're okay. So if you can get us a message, we'll accept that you're still leader, and if not, you'll step down. And Jakar agrees to this. And this leads to one scene, I think the other scene we already had, which is, there's a scene with Garibaldi. I said Garibaldi. I said it the Jakar way. Garibaldi and Jakar, which I really liked, because it kind of reinforced this idea that Sheridan says you have, like, our support, and Garibaldi says, look, you can't move through weapons through Babylon 5. That it goes against kind of the point of the station in a lot of ways. But
I got a guy.
Here's a crystal, and again, it's a moment where I think Jakar kind of like is thankful and respects Garibaldi, and there's a kind of a bond forming there as well, which is nice.
Right, which is something that he's lost with Londo. Absolutely,
yeah. And then later, of course, the other side of this is when he goes to Sheridan and says, look, I need to get a message from the homeworld through to stay in power. And this is the thing, not only has Sheridan promised support to Jakar, but he also brings up a really good point in that if they take Jakar away as the leader of the Narn on the station, then whoever replaces him might be difficult. It might be not someone they can be friendly with. It might be someone who causes more problems. Jakar is someone who they've built a relationship with, who's a known quantity, I think is the phrase he uses. But there's a lot of reasons to go through with this, and it ends up being the Rangers who have smuggled this message through and keep Jakar in kind of... Power is not the right word, because he's not in power, but he's the representative of the Narn population.
He's still leading the resistance. Yeah.
So... yeah, I think the subplot obviously is very strong stuff. It's all very important stuff, because it's doing all the continuation of this Narn Centauri conflict, which is technically not a war anymore, but as Jakar himself puts it, like, you know, maybe it's quieting down, and maybe it's not publicly a war anymore.
The war is not over. Yeah.
So yeah, all that stuff was really good. So that was like, you know, whatever failings I had with some of the monologuing of the Inquisitor stuff, everything in the subplot was like, oh no, this is good subplots. This is all, you know, gold. But I think it's fair to say this is probably my least favorite episode though of the last like 4 or 5 episodes, because we just had like a string of good to amazing episodes. So if this is what a weak episode is now, then I'm not complaining.
I wonder if instead of Jack the Ripper, if it was another Vorlon just in the suit, if we would have liked it more.
I don't think so. I think because what killed it was the monologuing, just sort of blurring together, and you know, it'd been hard to kind of even focus on what he was saying half the time.
Yeah.
I don't think the Vorlon would have helped that any much. And at least this way it had the crazy reveal at the end of Jack the Ripper. Like, we wouldn't have had that. That'd have been just gone. That made the ending memorable. Like, I'm going to remember the reveal of Jack the Ripper now.
Yeah, well, I don't want to brag, but...
yeah. I figured it out the second he was on screen.
Pretty much. I mean, it was either him or Sherlock Holmes is the only English people I know. Oh, and James Bond. Maybe it was James Bond.
Yeah. And just for the comments, obviously, this shouldn't have to be stated, but Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character, and Jack the Ripper is not. I just wanted, just in case someone, because I was joking about that earlier, I just want to make it clear that everyone is aware, that we're aware, or at least I'm aware, that Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character.
Mind blown.
As is James Bond, just to tack that on since you mentioned him a second ago. So, yes. So yeah, I still think there's a lot of great things in this episode, but it definitely has more faults than any of the episodes we've done in the last like 5 or 6 or so. Like, we've had a really good string of episodes.
Yeah.
So, but we got a finale next week, and I expect big things.
And a kiss.
And possibly a kiss between Delenn and Sheridan.
A kiss.
And also maybe Garibaldi and Jakar if they're feeling really frisky.
Look into those deep red eyes.
That said, though, we know Jakar's taste. Jakar's got a taste for the human ladies. So
yeah, I bet Delenn's looking pretty good to him right now. He's too distracted. He's got too many big, like, daunting, like, the survival of my race. Yeah, no time for women.
Things that he's made. He's not got time for meaningless sex right now. I feel like Delenn halfway through sex would bring out some crystals and start chanting or something. I don't know. I think it'd get weird.
I don't really think about that stuff very much.
And not in a kinky way. Like, weird in a... What are you doing? Okay. Maybe I'll get into this.
I've been into some homes with people who have like all these crystals and stuff for their whatever, like their crystals align with their chakras, or I don't know. I don't know what crystal logic is.
I just like to believe they're from Krypton, and these are just Kryptonian crystals.
Oh, okay. They're just minerals.
It was a nerdy. I know. I was just being a nerdy Superman fan for a second, okay, and cracking a little joke. Is this because I had to point out Sherlock Holmes was a fictional character? You're pointing out to me that Krypton's not real? Is that what this is? Is this tit for tat?
No.
Tat for tit?
No.
Alright, I think that about wraps up.
I think you're projecting a little bit here.
I think that wraps up Comes the Inquisitor. Oh dear. Let us know what you think of the episode in the comments below. Please do like, subscribe, and ding the bell for notifications on YouTube. It is how YouTube channels grow and attract more audience members, so please do hit the buttons. It does help us out a lot. And of course, Tara is going to tell you all about Patreon.
Yep. If you enjoy these reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/SmileFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get bonus episodes for other shows we do, including the ACE, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is our science fiction movie review show. So if you like science fiction shows, maybe you like science fiction movies. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these reviews 1 whole week early. So you can check that out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thanks.
I knew how it was ending when you started, though, admittedly. So it wasn't a nice twist and turn at the end or anything.
Jerk.
I knew it was going to be Jack the Ripper at the end of that Patreon.
I knew you would take this personal.
I'm only joking. I don't really care.
I have predicted the ending now.
That's been our Babylon 5 discussion.
Did you forget what show we were doing?
A little bit, yeah. I'm too busy thinking about more possible Jack the Ripper jokes that I can crack, but nothing's coming to me. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5. Just don't give away the home world.